Teaching Christian Basics, Lesson 6, Higher Criticism. What's that mean? Higher criticism is a way of approaching the biblical text that assumes a human origin and intent of the biblical writers. Higher criticism began as an intellectual movement in the mid-19th century in Germany, but it's infected what we identify as most of the mainline liberal churches, especially in the United States. The higher critics often assume a historical, factual, or theological errors that are included in the text. The authors of the biblical text are understood by the higher critics to not be those who are stated in the text. So, for example, they would say that, well, Matthew didn't write Matthew, or he just gathered together different sources, or that there's different Isaiahs. Moses didn't write the first 5 books of the Bible, but rather it was culled together from all these different sources, J, D, E, P, and so forth. Higher critics are particularly interested in the source documents. That's one of the ways you can tell you're talking to a higher critic, because they're trying to figure out who wrote this text before it was written. Most often they assume that the scriptures are political propaganda shaped by the culture. That seems to be the kind of general motivation of the higher critics. And therefore the higher critic will see themselves at liberty to criticize the teaching of the scripture. Again, most of the mainline denominations that are out there are steeped in higher criticism, and especially at the university level, at the seminary level, or if you go to any state university and you study Bible as lit or something like that, you're going to be just loaded down with higher criticism. Now, this topic of higher criticism, higher criticism denies those attributes of the scripture that we talked about in lesson 2, and so we want to reject it in every way. But it does lead to this question: well, how do we use our mind and our reason when it comes to the scripture? And we make a distinction between the magisterial use of reason and the ministerial use of reason. Magisterial comes from magistrate, which means ruler, so that a magisterial use of reason would have reason ruling over the scriptures. Our reason looking at the scriptures and criticizing the scriptures and seeing what part of the scriptures we like or we don't like, what we think belongs there, what doesn't. Ministerial use of reason, on the other hand, it comes from the word minister or servant, and that puts our reason into a place of service of the scriptures, so that we look on the scriptures not as something to be mastered, but as something to be served. So we look at the text of the scripture and we humble our minds, we humble ourselves, and we use our reason to figure out what the words say, but we don't assume that they're going to make sense or that we're going to like all these words. In fact, it's one of the fundamental parts of any religion and of any revelation, is that when God talks to us, he has to talk to us because he has to tell us things that we probably don't want to hear, that we might not understand. So a ministerial use of reason understands this and comes with a humble approach of service to the scriptures, and that's what we're after in everything that we do.